Ever heard of the Axeman of New Orleans? A tale of a ruthless serial killer, a haunting jazz tune, and a city paralyzed by fear. But who was the real Axeman, and what unspeakable horrors did he unleash in the dead of night? Brace yourself, as we're about to dive into this horrifying tale. Now, as we prepare to dive into our story, make sure you're comfortable. Are you ready? It's story time. Maria stepped out of the cab, her heels clicking against the cobblestone street. The familiar sight of her childhood home in the heart of New Orleans brought a nostalgic smile to her face. The old Victorian house, with its peeling paint and creaky porch, was a beacon of warmth and familiarity amidst the city's bustling chaos. As she walked up the steps, the front door swung open, revealing her parents. Her mother, a petite woman with a warm smile, rushed forward, enveloping Maria in a tight hug. Her father, a tall man with graying hair, stood behind, his eyes twinkling with joy. "Maria, my dear, you're finally here," her mother exclaimed, pulling back to hold her at arm's length. "Look at you, all grown up and living in the big city." Her father chuckled, pulling Maria into a bear hug. "Your mother's been cooking all day. You know how she gets when she's nervous." Maria laughed, the sound echoing through the quiet street. "I can't wait, Mama. Your cooking is the one thing I miss the most." The family moved inside, the front door closing behind them. The house was filled with the aroma of garlic and tomatoes, a scent that instantly transported her back to her childhood. The dining table was set, the silverware gleaming under the chandelier's soft light. As they sat down for dinner, the room filled with laughter and stories. Maria's parents asked about her life in the city, her job, her friends. Maria, in turn, listened to their stories about the neighborhood, the local gossip, the small events that made up their quiet life. The evening passed in a blur of warmth and nostalgia, a perfect family reunion. But as she looked out the window, she couldn't shake off a sense of unease, a feeling that this perfect night was about to take a sinister turn. As the evening wore on, Maria found herself drawn to the window. The street outside was bathed in the soft glow of the lamplight, casting long, dancing shadows on the cobblestone. It was then that she noticed him, a figure standing across the street, his face obscured by the brim of his hat. The figure stood still, his gaze seemingly fixed on their house. A shiver ran down her spine. She told herself it was just a passerby, someone out for a late-night stroll. But the figure didn't move, didn't walk away. He just stood there, like a statue, his presence casting a dark shadow over the warm family gathering. Maria tried to shake off the feeling of unease. She turned away from the window, forcing herself to focus on her family, on the laughter and stories that filled the room. But the image of the man outside, his silhouette against the lamplight, stuck with her, a dark cloud hanging over the evening's festivities. As the night progressed, she found herself glancing at the window, her eyes searching for the mysterious figure. But each time she looked, the street was empty, the figure nowhere in sight. She told herself it was just her imagination, a trick of the light. But the sense of unease lingered, a silent warning of the horror that was about to unfold. Later that night, as the family began to retire, Maria's father pulled her aside. His jovial demeanor had faded, replaced by a look of concern. He led her into his study, a room filled with the scent of old books and pipe tobacco. "Maria," he began, his voice low, "I need to tell you about something. There's a man, they call him the Axeman. He's been causing quite a stir in the city." She laughed, brushing off her father's words. "The Axeman? Sounds like a character from one of your old detective novels." Her father didn't share her amusement. "This is serious, Maria. This man, he's a killer. He's been breaking into homes, attacking people. The whole city's on edge." She looked at her father, his face etched with worry. She wanted to reassure him, to tell him that it was just a story, an urban legend. But the memory of the figure outside, his unmoving silhouette, sent a chill down her spine. "I'll be careful, Papa," she said, forcing a smile. "Now, let's not let this Axeman ruin our evening." With that, Maria bid her parents goodnight and retired to her old room. As she lay in bed, the house creaking around her, she couldn't shake off her father's warning. The Axeman, the figure outside, the sense of unease, it all swirled in her mind, a dark cloud threatening to engulf her. As sleep finally claimed her, Maria was unaware of the horror that awaited. The night was still, the city holding its breath, as if anticipating the terror that was about to unfold. In the silence of her old room, Maria lay wide awake. The comforting familiarity of the room did little to ease her mind. The wallpaper, the old wooden dresser, the childhood photos, they all seemed to be tainted by the shadow of the Axeman. Her father's warning echoed in her mind, mingling with the image of the figure she had seen outside. She tossed and turned, the sheets tangling around her. Sleep seemed like a distant dream, chased away by her racing thoughts. The house creaked around her, each sound amplified in the stillness of the night. She told herself it was just the house settling, just the wind outside. But the sense of unease lingered, a silent specter in the room. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. It was followed by another, and then another, the unmistakable sound of her parents. A chill ran down Maria's spine, her heart pounding in her chest. The screams were abruptly cut off, replaced by a chilling thud, a sound that she knew deep down was an axe chopping into flesh. She was paralyzed with fear, her mind screaming at her to move, to do something. But her body refused to obey, frozen in the face of the unimaginable horror unfolding in her parents' room. The house fell silent again, the only sound Maria's ragged breathing and the pounding of her heart. With a surge of adrenaline, Maria forced herself out of bed. She had to see, had to know what was happening. As she stepped out of her room, the chilling reality of her father's warning came crashing down on her. The Axeman was not just a story, not just an urban legend. He was real, and he was in their house. With every step towards her parents' room, Maria's heart pounded louder in her chest. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the dim light casting long, monstrous shadows on the walls. She reached the door, her hand trembling as she pushed it open. The sight that met her eyes was something out of a nightmare. Her parents lay in their bed, their bodies lifeless and brutally mutilated. The room was a scene of carnage, the air thick with the metallic scent of blood. The once familiar room was now a chilling tableau of death and horror. Maria's knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor, her scream echoing through the silent house. Tears streamed down her face, her body shaking with sobs. But grief was quickly replaced by terror as the reality of the situation set in. The Axeman had been there, in their house, and he could still be there. She forced herself to her feet, her mind racing. She had to get out, had to escape. But as she turned to leave, a chilling thought struck her. If the Axeman had done this, then he was still in the house. She was not alone. With a newfound sense of dread, she moved away from the gruesome scene, her every sense heightened. She knew she had to be quiet, had to be careful. The Axeman was still there, and she was his next target. As Maria moved away from the horrifying scene, a soft, eerie tune began to play from somewhere inside the house. It was a jazz tune, the notes floating through the air, a chilling contrast to the horror that had just unfolded. The music seemed to seep into the walls, the floor, the very air, a haunting melody that sent a shiver down Maria's spine. She knew then, with a chilling certainty, that the Axeman was still there. The music was his calling card, a macabre soundtrack to the night of terror. Every note seemed to echo the swing of his axe, the screams of his victims, the silent aftermath of his departure. Suddenly, a shadow moved at the end of the hallway. Maria froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure stepped into the dim light, revealing the silhouette of a man. He was tall, his figure imposing, an axe gleaming in his hand. It was him, the Axeman. A scream caught in Maria's throat as the Axeman began to move towards her. She turned and ran, her footsteps echoing through the silent house. She could hear the Axeman behind her, his footsteps steady and relentless. She managed to reach the stairs, her legs carrying her up to the second floor. She could hear the Axeman's footsteps growing louder, closer. She knew she had to hide, had to find a place where he couldn't find her. With a final burst of energy, Maria managed to reach the attic. She slammed the door behind her, sliding the bolt into place just as the Axeman reached the top of the stairs. She was safe, for now. As Maria sank to the floor, the eerie jazz tune still playing in the background, she knew that the night of terror was far from over. The Axeman was still in the house, and she was his next target. In the dim light of the attic, Maria could hear the Axeman's footsteps growing louder. Each step echoed through the silent house, a chilling reminder of the danger just outside the door. She was trapped, her only protection the thin wooden door that separated her from the Axeman. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked around the attic. It was filled with old furniture and boxes, relics of her family's past. Among the clutter, she spotted something that made her heart skip a beat. An old revolver, a relic from her father's days in the police force. Maria had never held a gun before, let alone fired one, but she knew that it was her only chance. She picked up the revolver, the cold metal heavy in her hands. She checked the cylinder. It was loaded. As she held the gun, Maria felt a strange sense of calm. She was no longer a helpless victim, waiting for the Axeman to find her. She was a fighter, ready to confront the monster that had turned her world upside down. With the revolver in her hand, Maria moved to the corner of the attic, her back against the wall. She could hear the Axeman's footsteps growing louder, the eerie jazz tune playing in the background. She knew that the confrontation was inevitable, that the Axeman was coming for her. But Maria was ready. She had the revolver, and she had the will to fight. As she waited for the Axeman to break down the door, Maria knew that she was not going down without a fight. The first part of her final confrontation was about to begin. The eerie jazz tune grew louder, the notes echoing through the silent house. Maria could hear the Axeman's footsteps outside the door, each step a chilling reminder of the impending confrontation. She gripped the revolver tighter, her knuckles white. Suddenly, the door to the attic burst open. The Axeman stood in the doorway, his silhouette looming in the dim light. He held an axe in his hand, the blade gleaming ominously. His eyes, hidden under the brim of his hat, were fixed on Maria. A scream caught in Maria's throat as the Axeman stepped into the attic. She raised the revolver, her hand shaking. She had never fired a gun before, had never even held one, but she knew she had to try. With a deep breath, Maria pulled the trigger. The gun kicked back, the sound of the gunshot echoing through the attic. But the bullet missed, embedding itself in the wooden wall behind the Axeman. The Axeman lunged at her, his axe raised. Maria tried to move, to dodge his attack, but her body refused to obey. She was frozen in place, her eyes locked on the gleaming blade of the axe. As the Axeman closed the distance between them, Maria knew that this was it. The final confrontation, the moment of truth. She was face to face with the Axeman, and there was nowhere left to run. The Axeman towered over Maria, his silhouette a monstrous figure in the dim light. His axe was raised high, poised to strike. The eerie jazz tune had reached its climax, the haunting melody echoing through the silent house. Maria was frozen in place, her eyes locked on the gleaming blade of the axe. She could see her reflection in the polished metal, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. She gripped the revolver tighter, her knuckles white, but she knew it was too late. The Axeman brought down his axe, the movement swift and precise. Maria closed her eyes, a silent prayer on her lips. She could hear the whoosh of the axe cutting through the air, the sound chillingly final. And then, everything went black. As our story comes to a close, let the lull of this soothing ambiance continue to cradle you further into your journey of calmness and rest. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your relaxation and sleep routine tonight. Remember, Each day brings a new story, and each night brings a fresh chance to regenerate, to dream, and to become more of who you are. As this background sound lulls you further into sleep, I hope you find peace, comfort, and a well-deserved rest. Good night, dear listener. Until our next story, sleep well and dream beautifully.